Hello and welcome to the Rally Point with Dominic Fielder, the author of the King's German series, and myself, Rob McLaren, the author of the Jobert series. Dominic Fielder is dealing with a sick family member this evening and is unable to join us. Now, each month at the Rally Point, we catch up with friends who enjoy the Napoleonic period. We record the first 30 minutes of the gathering, but we remain online after the conversation continues. And this month, we'd like to welcome Marc Middleton from France, and James Cormier from New Mexico to the Rally Point. James and Marc are both historical reenactors, and they have just experienced the 210th anniversary of Waterloo. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome.
Thank you for having us again.
Now, you've got a presentation. You've just undertaken this immersive march from Quatre Bras to Waterloo, and an amazing achievement to bring reenactors from all over the world to do this and have it as an adjunct to the Waterloo activity. How did you find it? How did it begin? What was the inspiration?
Okay. Well, as I said, a reenactment 210 years in the making. Okay. So the way I've decided to organize tonight's presentation, I'm going to be working with Jim. I'll be doing the first part, which is the build up, the organizational parts, all the way to the day where the night actually, where everybody gathered near the Quatre Bras battlefield to start the march. From that point on, Jim's going to be talking about some feedback. We asked to try to get some information, some feedback from the participants to help us present the findings of the guys on the field. So Jim will take care of that part in the second half. So without further ado, the story of the QBW March 2025. With a picture. So all the peer photos you'll be seeing are photos that were done during the said march. So why organize a Quatre Bras Waterloo march? It's never happened. That was probably the first thing that attracted me to the idea of doing it. The Prussian reenactors, since the 1990s, I believe, have always organized a Linny to Waterloo March. They do it the week before. They take 4 to 5 days, I believe, to march. So it's a nice steady pace all the way there. They did it again this year. They started earlier than us, and they arrived 1 day earlier than our starting point. So simply, from my point of view, the initial draw was, it's never been done before, therefore I'm interested. Secondly, as part of the progressive immersive side of Napoleonic reenactment, I figured that this was the opportunity to showcase to other reenactors of the Napoleonic period that don't necessarily do immersive reenactment, or they have never heard of it, or they have heard of it but are worried about it. Is this too much for me? What sort of things can we expect? So since I knew that everybody was going to be turning up to this 2025 really big Waterloo weekend, it's like offering them, well, hey, if you get in a day earlier, you'll be able to do this, and then afterwards you'll be able to do the big Waterloo battle. So those two things together perked my interest basically, and I thought, let's go for it. So this is it in a nutshell. Okay, the idea came at around the middle of April for my birthday. Someone made a joke about walking between Quatre Bras and Waterloo, and I laughed, and the idea stayed in my head. So I reached out to some contacts and some friends in the area. They were all up for it, so I figured I could count on a framework of people to do the event. So I decided to press on with it. I also, in May, participated in a Belgian Revolution 1830 event near the battlefield of Quatre Bras. That's when I met the Baron. Belgian barons gave his property, his lands for that particular reenactment. I was presented to him by the Belgian officer that you see in the middle of the photo, Laurent. I got on well with Monsieur le Baron. And then afterwards, I just said, well, I'm looking, the most difficult part when you're organizing something like this is actually a site, a bivouac, a campsite to start off. The rest in between, you're just passing. But you do need somewhere where the people can sleep. So finding it's essentially farmers in that area that are open-minded to that and bearing in mind that it's never happened before. That was extremely difficult, but thankfully, Monsieur le Baron was more than enthusiastic about the idea. And from that point on, I knew we had something, the beginnings of something. So in the summer of 2024, having secured the site, we then did a route inspection, just checking out all the different possibilities, all the different routes that could be taken, what would be the most interesting from an historical point of view, what would be the most practical. And then after it's a combo basically of those two elements together. The most historical route would have involved us walking about 10 kilometers towards the east to get onto the main Brussels road, which is the road they took, and then head north. And all you would have done at that point is just march sideways. You wouldn't even have marched forwards. So in the end, it was, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go straight. And at the Dernier Quartier Général, so Napoleon's last headquarters on the battlefield, that's when we'd join the historical Brussels road. So having selected our route and having inspected it to make sure that it was feasible, you then start the paperwork process. First of all, it's meeting the bourgmestre, the mayor of the town of Genappe, meeting the man responsible for policing, meeting the adjutant of the president of the committee of the villagers of Genappe, meeting afterwards the sub mayor of some other breath. I think I've met about 5 different politicians in this to tick, make sure I got their little tick on my on my application to get this through. But Belgium is notorious. I mean, people joke that France is difficult admin wise, admin procedures. Belgium takes it to a whole nother level, basically. So once that was done, once I got the public powers on my side, it was time to do a final route because we had to do the fully for the police, the chief constable of the local police. We had to give him a proper defined route, and I had to give him times when we would be going through this route, and I'd have to tell him where we would be doing the different pauses, the different breaks along this route. So it was quite a thick application form to fill out for that particular man. One of the notable questions on that form, I think, was on page 7, which I've taken the liberty of printing up. It says, is this event open to the public? As in, is this like a concert? Is this an area and you're going to be bringing public in? No. Is this event, can this event involve public? Yes, we're on public routes, so we could indeed meet people in front of their houses or along these public roads. Are there any, and I quote, hardcore fans that will be attending this event? What's a hardcore fan? What's not a hardcore fan? I just put no and hoped for the best. and it worked, obviously. So the whole paperwork aspect, this is the first time I've worked with Belgians. I know my own country's way of doing things. I know the British way of doing things as well. But Belgium was a totally different ball game, and I'm so happy that the initial group that supported me initially in April were on hand to help me with this process. Otherwise, I think I would have pulled my hair out and gone bald before my time. That went in February, mid-February, and then after this, a waiting game. End of March, I was actually starting to get worried that if they don't give the green light, am I going to have to cancel it? Because people are now going to be organizing traveling. We've got people intercontinental traveling as well coming over. So luckily, literally to the day before, I thought I better write an email just to prepare people. I got an official letter from the mairie and the local commune of villagers saying everything's validated. The police had their signature on it. It's green lit. So the event is what we call greenlit, and then it was a case of getting it out there. Now I can start the publicity. Up to then, I'd kept the publicity of the event, the promotion of the event, very limited. I didn't want to make it very, very big news until I was 100% sure it was going ahead. Otherwise, if I had done it the other way, and if it hadn't been greenlit, well, then there's a lot of backtracking to be done. So now is the moment to start getting the information out there. That's when Jim heard about it, etc. And between May and the whole of June, getting guys locked in. And that's not just, yeah, I'll come along, I'll sign me up, because there were also costs involved. We had to hire, for example, porter cabin toilets so that the people wouldn't desecrate the land of the Baron. We had to buy straw so that the people who were staying the Friday night could sleep. And also, I insisted that Monsieur le Baron take a little bit, just a little bit of money as a thank you for it. He didn't want any alcohol or chocolate, so I thought we'll just take a little bit of money, and then afterwards you can take you and your wife to a lovely restaurant for the evening, which he did appreciate apparently. And then afterwards, last minute dealing with roadblocks. This came really at the beginning of July, where this is now snowballed. There was a Facebook group, people getting involved from all over Europe and the world. The Waterloo organizers heard about it. The Waterloo organizers were very worried that I was stealing their thunder. They contacted me several times saying, we have things scheduled for the Friday night. We're worried that after your march, the people on Friday night will not be able to take part because they will be too knackered. And as could you cancel it or change the date? Like the Prussians arrive on the Thursday. I said, no, we're too far gone. And it dawned on me that I asked them, how many people do you think are actually turning up to this thing? And he says, well, we reckon it's about 2,000 people, the whole lot, 1,000. And I said, no, we're about 100, just over 100. And as soon as they got that number, they were like, oh, in that case, do what you want. But initially, for a week, they really bothered me with this. But that's a roadblock that got out of the way. So that's the long road of the organization of such an event. So as you can see, April 2004, initial idea, delivery of event, end of July 2025. Now, this is what happened in the end. So you've got the route map here. So Monsieur le Baron, as you can see, he doesn't live on Quatre Bras itself. Where his chateau was is actually, so it would be the very, 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 very far left of Ney's position and then some. And it would be on the right of Wellington's position, basically. He had some cavalry coming in from Nivelles anyway, but no combat happened in this area. This was much more to the east around Quatre Bras. So the different markings in red, this was the map I had to submit to the public powers, and these are the different GPS coordinates of the different areas that I had highlighted as being breakpoints. Okay, that's how detailed it got at one point. So for the Allies, it was an 18.7-kilometer walk in the end, because where you see Maison du Roi, you've got a little blue post-it. That's the Dernier Quartier Général de Napoleon. That's Napoleon's last HQ. That's where the French participants were stopping. And then after the British and Dutch and not Prussians, but German allies continued on to Hougoumont. So the French marched in total 15.3 kilometers, and the Allies walked 18.7 kilometers in one day. There were 6 10 to 15-minute breaks during that march, one 40-minute lunch break. The marching started at 9:30-ish, and I didn't record the arrival time for the French at their Quartier Général, but we in Hougoumont arrived there at about 3:30 p.m. The weather was overcast. There was a 10-minute light rain shower at the start when we got the marching going. And then afterwards, the last 40 minutes, the clouds disappeared and the sun came out and it did get hot. It was a notoriously hot weekend, that Waterloo, the Saturday and the Sunday. We were incredibly lucky. Very, very honestly, we were incredibly lucky that on Friday it was completely covered up with grey clouds. There was only one guy that had to be evacuated during the march because halfway through, roughly where the village of Promel in the middle of the march is, his souls were literally being had. How did he say? My souls have adhered to my the inside of my shoes, and they're now being ripped. So he couldn't march anymore, and he didn't want to continue for fear that he would wreck his feet so much that he would have to give up his entire weekend and just sit in a tent. So he decided to cut his losses then. Had there been the weather we had the next day and the Sunday, 50%, I reckon, of the participants would have been knocked out because that weather was really, really difficult. So we were incredibly lucky weather-wise. Some statistics for you. Jim will be dealing with most of it, but this is the global statistics. 123 people registered and paid the subs to take part. Only 102 actually turned up. The rest, I think I had 7 people wrote to me for various reasons that they couldn't take part. The rest just kindly donated the money to the event. 1 evacuee, as I said, during the march. 19 different reenactment groups were represented. 51 reenactors were representing French army soldiers, 22 Dutch-Belgian army, and 29 were British army soldiers. And I've also put the statistics of the real nationality of every participant. We had 10 nationalities in all, as you can see, and it's no shock, we're in their country. The Belgians were the most numerous. Romania, there was 1 Romanian. What was very interesting and a little bit exotic is we had 7 Americans and 3 Chinese. Okay, and when I say 3 Chinese, these are not people who are of Chinese ancestry who grew up in America and in Europe. These are Chinese born in China, raised in China. First time they left Europe. And they did well. They went all they did the entire march. So now that I've given the story, the background, and how it went generally, Jim's going to take over now and talk about some of the feedback we got from participants. So I'll hand it over to you now, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Next slide, please. So here are the statistics for the people who responded to our questionnaire. Mark and I developed 5 or 6 questions that the feedback of which we thought might be meaningful and helpful to historians and authors. And we will address each one of those questions in time. But out of 103 participants, we had 20 people respond to our survey, which really, 20% is not a bad sample rate. So we consider these 20 respondents to be a good representative sample of those who are participated in the march. And the breakdown here is just for the people who responded. So here's the breakdown of the respondees. For some reason, the Americans wanted to get their opinion across. No surprise there. Americans tend to be mouthy, but the Chinese guys, Mark, how many were there? 2 of those Chinese people that responded? Do you remember?
3 participated, 1 responded.
1 responded. Okay. Next slide, please, Mark.
5%. Oh, excuse me.
Here's the age breakdown. Of interest, what I think is interesting is that the largest proportion were men between the age of 35 and 39, which I think might be a little bit older than the average age of the French soldier in 2015, considerably older than the age of the average French soldier the year before and the 2013 campaigns. Those campaigns, Napoleon was drawing from increasingly younger and younger classes of available conscripts. But in 2015, the French army was composed to a large degree of older veteran soldiers. Next slide, please, Mark. So here's the first of our questions, and you can see the response. So 11 people thought it was just absolutely fantastic. And I suspect, speaking for the 7 Americans that participated, I asked them when we were there and before we actually showed up for the march, why do you want to do this? Their response was, we wanted to know how it felt. They wanted to experience. It wasn't for glory. It wasn't to prove anything. That we just wanted to know what that would be like. And I suspect that was the general attitude of most of the participants. Next slide, please, Mark. So this is an important question. We were trying to figure out, well, how close to what we believe to be the historically accurate load of a soldier in 1815 did these participants come to that? And there's your answer. Some people didn't even bother. I have no idea. They all said it was heavy, but I suspect that the average load for a soldier in 1815, fully loaded on campaign, was somewhere between 20 and 25 kilograms. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my interpretation. So almost a half of the participants, according to the sample, carried that load. Next slide, please, Mark. And this question was kind of important, at least in my mind, was to a large extent the soldiers that were in that 1815 campaign on all 3 sides, French, Allied, and Prussian. Not very many of them were, a small percentage, relatively speaking, were brand new soldiers that did not have much experience marching. So we were just wondering, well, how much experience did you have marching leading up to this event? And there's your answer. So better than half, conditioned themselves to some extent to participate in this march. And I can only guess what the 7 that didn't participate, how they felt after the march. I spent 21 years in the U.S. Army Infantry. If you're not conditioned to do a long march, you are definitely going to feel it the next day in various ways. Next slide, please, Mark. So as Mark said, we were really lucky with the weather. It was very cool. I was checking the temperature. I did not myself participate on the march. I drove a rental vehicle carrying extra water, and I was prepared to evacuate anyone who fell out. But I routinely was checking the temperature. And in Fahrenheit, it was the upper 60s and it was overcast. But yet, a majority of the participants felt there was some difficulty due to either the humidity or the heat or both. And even though the temperature, the ambient temperature, was not that hot, from anybody who's marched any distance with any amount of load, you march a mile, especially in the woolen clothing that these soldiers were wearing, you're going to generate heat. So the heat generated just by marching was apparently an issue for a good portion of the participants. Next slide, please, Mark. So we asked the question, well, you're wearing period uniforms. Were they designed for purpose? And the majority said, yeah. With some exceptions, we'll address that on the next slide. Next slide, please, Mark. So a majority, not a majority, but a substantial near half of the participants had issues with the straps on the haversack, sac à dos, however you characterize your backpack. And I noticed that the uniforms on some nationalities, they will have an epaulet, and you would wear your pack strap over that epaulet. And on the French line, if you're going to do your uniform, that is the case. So when I wear a pack, I don't really see the issue. But for other uniforms, there's nothing or just a cloth strap. And those backpack straps are not very wide, nothing at all like you see on modern backpacks. And that apparently was an issue for almost half the participants. Next slide, please, Mark. So he asked the question, well, was anything particularly clever in your opinion in terms of use? And the canteen was the winner on that question. I won't speculate as to why, but I think it's kind of obvious. This marmite, I think what that refers to is one of the French reenactors carried with him what's called a grand biton, which is a large canteen. And of course, he filled it with water. So he was able to replenish himself and his compatriots with water en route. So he had a little extra water load carried with him. And he's a stout fellow and was quite capable of carrying much more weight. I know the fellow. I'm curious about the two the two participants who said not a single thing was useful. So I don't know how to interpret that, but there you have it.
Both of them were from British infantry units.
No comment. So next slide, please. So this was a question, and in last month's rally point, there was a presentation on the Battle of Castiglione, focusing on the terrain and the weather, and how I believe that battle happened in August in northern Italy, very hot, very humid, and was the water supply an issue? And the answer from these participants, it was an issue. Half the participants, the respondent says, I needed a refill. So one canteen load was not sufficient to get them, whether you're French, about 8 miles or British 11 miles. And we did provide water resupply en route. Not as much in retrospect as I think we should have, but that's a lesson learned. Next slide, please, Mark. And this is what I think was, a good question, because there's always a lot of talk on the design of the shoes worn at the time, and people compare those to modern shoe design. So we wondered, well, how well did those period correct shoes do for you? So only 2 of the participants did not wear period correct shoes, and almost a majority said these shoes worked out fine and they had no issues, they had no problems. And there's a lot more data we can find. Well, how new were these shoes? Is this the first time you wore them? That might be the reason you had blisters, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought that was an interesting question. And the one person who did fall out had a wardrobe failure in terms of his shoes. And when you read anecdotes about soldiers, their memoirs, that seemed to be one of the biggest issues that they complained about talked about, is the shoes falling apart en route. So we experienced that on this particular march. Next slide, please, Mark. And that's it. What are your questions?
And let me express on behalf of the audience tonight, that was brilliant. Gentlemen, that was absolutely excellent. It was fascinating to see the amount of effort that goes into such an activity just for 100 people. And also the data that you collected and the way that you collected it, and it represented so well so many fascinating issues that weren't an opinion, which was very, very good. Very good. Okay, thank you, everyone. Fascinating conversation so far. I'm about to end the recording, but please stay online as we continue the chat. To wrap up this month's Rally Point, thank you, Marc Middleton, and thank you, Jim Cormier, for joining us. Gentlemen, thank you.
You're welcome.
For those of you who have joined us live this evening, thank you for your time with us. Next time when I join us here at the Rally Point next month. Now, next month is September, when I'm in Europe, and video production is tricky. But the next Rally Point is in October, where Stephen Summerfield will be talking to us about iron artillery, the iron artillery used in Navy and siege artillery. Simply contact Dominic Fielder or I for your Zoom invite. Our details are at the end of the video, and share Rally Point with your friends so we can hear from them as well. Any previous Rally Point chats are up on our YouTube channel. And if you've enjoyed this Rally Point, please leave a quick review. So good morning from me, and Dominic, I hope your family is well. Good night from him.